Hello, everyone, and welcome to phyloseminar.org. The current theme is on building phylogenetic networks, and this is the first talk in a series of 3 talks on that topic. Please use the YouTube live comment box to ask questions. Today's speaker is Dr. Simone Linz, who received a master's degree in biology and a PhD degree in computer science from the University of Dusseldorf, Germany. After postdoc positions in the US, Spain, and Germany, she was a Marie Curie Fellow at the University of Canterbury and the University of Tübingen. Since 2014, she has been a staff member in the School of Computer Science at the University of Auckland, where she is now a senior lecturer. Her research interests include algorithmic and mathematical questions related to phylogenetics. Welcome, Simona, and thank you for participating.
Thank you very much, Eric, for the introduction and invitation to speak today. And thank you for everyone who has joined the live stream. So as Eric pointed out, this is the first talk in a series of 3 talks on reconstructing phylogenetic networks from smaller building blocks. And in this talk today, I will be talking about how we can reconstruct these networks from small phylogenetic trees. And small phylogenetic trees in this talk today will be trees on 3 and 4 leaves. So I will talk about a particular result that together with child sample we have established like a couple of years ago. And along the way, I will try to give you a bit of an overview of some of the mathematical techniques that we use in this area of research, and also introduce some classes of phylogenetic networks, which you can think of as collection of these networks that satisfy certain structural properties. And I will talk about this more in like a couple of minutes. So let me start by giving you like 2 motivating examples, if you like. So the first one on the left-hand side of the slide is a phylogenetic network that represents the evolutionary history of the 5 big cat species. And since they have diverged from a common ancestor about 4.6 million years ago, they have undergone several rounds of hybridization events, with the most recent one between lion and jaguar. So all the red lines here in this network indicate hybridization events. On the right-hand side of the slides, there's another example about the evolutionary history of bread wheat. And this particular species here at the bottom of the slide is a result of several rounds of hybridization between the ancestral lineages of this species. So of course you may wonder, how frequent is this process, and do I really need to think about it when I analyze some data? And this is what James Mallet and his collaborators have thought about in this paper here, which was published in 2016. And what they have found is that about 1/4 of all flowering plant species and 10% of animal species are affected by hybridization. So I guess it's fair to say that not all evolutionary histories can be represented by a single phylogenetic tree. And depending on your data set, you may want to consider phylogenetic networks as well in your analysis. So throughout this talk, all phylogenetic trees and networks are rooted and binary. So the root is always at the top, the leaves are at the bottom. And for trees, I guess we all know what it means for a tree to be binary. All the internal vertices except for the root have degree 3, with 1 arc directed into a vertex and 2 directed out. For phylogenetic networks, every internal vertex still has degree 3, but we have here like 2 types of vertices. So the first type is the so-called tree vertex, and this is exactly what you have in a phylogenetic tree as well. So 1 arc is directed into the vertex and 2 are directed out. But then we also have what we call reticulations, and those are the vertices representing hybridization or lateral gene transfer. And here we have like 2 arcs directed into a vertex and 1 out. And we have 2 such vertices in this network here. So you can already see that for phylogenetic networks, there is at least 1 directed path from the root to every leaf. So not exactly 1, this is what we see in the tree, but at least 1 such path. And the multiplicity of these paths is one reason why these phylogenetic networks are so much more complicated to reconstruct and analyze. So it's never a straightforward generalization from trees to networks. And before I start talking about networks, I would just talk about a well-known result in the reconstruction of phylogenetic trees, and this is the reconstruction of such trees from rooted triplets. So we all know rooted triplets are just these little phylogenetic trees on 3 leaves, and I will write these, I will write these using like a sequence where the first elements in the sequence are always the leaves of a cherry. So this triple on leaves A, C, and D is represented by the sequence A, C, and D. And this triple is also what we say displayed or explained by the tree, because in the tree, A and C are also more closely related than either of the two is to D. So for each 3 leaves that are part of the tree, there is exactly one rooted triple that is explained by the tree. So DCA, for example, is not displayed by the tree. Now, you can have your tree and you get all the triplets embedded or displayed by the tree. For this example here, we get this set of rooted triplets, which I call R of T. And this set will become more important throughout the rest of the talk. But for now, the point is that this triple set actually, excuse me, actually encodes the tree. So what do I mean by that? Take your favorite tree and get all the triplets that are displayed by that tree. So get this set R of T. You may wonder, well, is the tree T the only tree whose set of triplets is R of T? And it turns out the answer to that question is yes. So given a set of triplets that comes from a tree, then we know that this tree is the unique phylogenetic tree whose set of triplets is R of T. And moreover, we can reconstruct this tree in polynomial time from the set of triplets. And this result underlies many algorithms in the reconstruction of supertrees. So supertrees are these phylogenetic networks that are reconstructed from smaller trees on overlapping leaf sets. So the leaf sets are not always the same as for consensus trees, but overlapping. And for example, Aho's algorithm called build takes as input an arbitrary set of triplets. So important here, it takes as input an arbitrary set of triplets. That means it could come from a tree, but could be basically any set of triplets. And it decides whether or not there exists a tree whose set of triplets is exactly the input. And if such a tree does not exist, the algorithm just exits. So let me move on to networks. And what we actually want to do is we want to establish an analogous encoding theorem for phylogenetic networks. So we know for phylogenetic trees, we can just take the rooted triplets. And a few years ago, we were wondering, can we establish something analogous for phylogenetic networks? And phylogenetic networks are often viewed as a collection of conflicting phylogenetic trees. And we do say, like, for example, that this tree here at the bottom is displayed by the phylogenetic tree over phylogenetic network over here, because if you look at the edges indicated in yellow, then what you see is that the branching pattern of those edges in the network is exactly the same as the branching pattern of this tree. So more formally, we say that a network displays, or perhaps more intuitively embeds, a tree if you can obtain the tree by deleting some edges and vertices and then suppressing vertices within degree 1 and out degree 1. So for example, this tree over here, where we have A, B, C on one side of the root and D and E on the other side of the root, is not displayed by the network, because if we pick up A and B as a cherry, we need to go this way, so through this reticulation edge. Then we pick up C, so then we already have to go up to the root and then pick up C from the other side. So there's no way that this network displays this tree over here. Now, instead of just looking at a single tree that is displayed by a network or not displayed by a network, we can also look at all the trees that are displayed by a network. And here I consider all the trees displayed who have the same leaf set as the network. And if we look at this collection of trees, then we call this collection the display set of the network. And I use T of n to denote the display set of a given network. And the size of this set is at most 2 to the k. So the intuition here is that every reticulation has n degree 2. So you have 2 choices for each reticulation. This phylogenetic network over here has 2 reticulations, and its display set contains these 4 trees. So the bound in this case here is sharp. However, in general, we have networks that display strictly less than 2 to the k trees. And an example for this is the network over here, where we have 3 reticulations. So we would expect a display set of size 8, 2 to the 3. But when we look at all the trees that are displayed by the network, we see that we can only actually find 5 phylogenetic trees on leaf set A, B, C, and D. And that's because this tree with the 2 cherries A and B and C and D is displayed several times by the network. So one way to display it is by using the edges indicated in red. Another way to display it is by using these edges indicated in red. So there's some freedom in how we choose the edges to display this tree. And in total, there are 4 possibilities to display the tree. And then together with the other 4 trees, that gives us, again, 8. But since we're talking about a set, the set only consists of 5 trees. And for now, I've only talked about trees displayed by the network that cover all the leaves of the network, but there's no reason why we cannot talk about triplets displayed by a network as well. So this is what we see here. Triple, again, just a 3-leaf tree. And ABC is displayed by the network because we can pick up A and B from this side of the network and then C from the other side. So this triple is displayed by the network. Similarly, BCA is also displayed by the network. And here, that for trees, we had the situation that for any 3 leaves, there's exactly 1 triple displayed by the network. Here we can actually have a situation where we look at 3 leaves and all 3 triplets are displayed by the network. A triple, however, that is not displayed by the network is A, C, and B. And to denote the set of all triplets of a network, I now use R of n. For a tree, we used R of t. So for a network, we use R of n. And going to 4 leaves, we call leaves on 4 leaves quads. And we only consider, for this talk, we only consider 1 tree shape. So we only consider the caterpillar, which is the shape that has exactly 1 cherry. And I use, again, the sequence notation. So this quad here, I denote this by B, C, A, and D. And it is a quad displayed by this network over here. So B and C are together in a cherry, then A, and then we pick up D from the other side of the root. The red quad is not displayed by the network. The 3 blue quads are all displayed by the network. And I use, in this case, I use Q of n to denote the set of quads of a network. Just to be very clear, because I will talk about quads quite a bit throughout the rest of the talk, and this phylogenetic tree is not a quad because it's not a caterpillar. So when I say quad, I really only consider those trees that have 4 leaves and have caterpillar shape. Oops. So let me talk about 3 network classes now. So as I said before, so the whole space of all phylogenetic networks is infinite. So, and therefore, because it's computational, often very intractable, we use several network classes in our analysis. And these network classes collect basically phylogenetic networks that have some structural properties that help us with our analysis. So I'm not saying that these are biologically meaningful classes, but from a mathematical point of view, they're very helpful. So the first class I would like to introduce is the class of tree chart networks. And we say that a phylogenetic network is tree chart if every non-leaf vertex or every internal vertex has a child that is a leaf or a tree vertex. So a tree vertex is a vertex with in degree 1 and out degree 2. Equivalently, you can think of this definition as a phylogenetic network that does not have what we call a stack or W. So stack is shown here. So this basically is an edge that's incident with 2 reticulations. And a W is a tree vertex whose 2 children are both reticulations. So if we neither have a stack or W in some network, then this network is tree chart. Now, the next definition is that of a shortcut. So we look at some edge in the phylogenetic network, and we say that this edge from U to V is a shortcut if there exists a directed path from U to V that does not pass through the edge UV, or a directed path from U to V that avoids the edge UV. So here we have a reticulation, and we look at the 2 parents, P1 and P2. And P2 is an ancestor of P1, so we immediately know that this edge from P2 to V is a shortcut. And shortcuts cause trouble for all sorts of mathematical proofs. So we often like to look at networks without shortcuts first. And we call a phylogenetic network normal if it is tree chart and additionally has no shortcut. So the class of normal networks sits inside the class of tree chart networks because every normal network is also tree chart. And the last class I'd like to introduce for today is that of level 1 networks. And for level 1 networks, we look at the cycles, the underlying cycles. So there are no directed cycles, but still undirected or underlying cycles in the network. And we say that a network is level 1 if no 2 underlying cycles share a vertex. Okay, so all the underlying cycles are sort of distinct and placed in different parts of the network. And this class is also a subclass of the class of tree chart networks. However, if you look at normal networks and level 1 networks, so there are normal networks that are not level 1, because normal networks do not have any restrictions on the cycles, so you can have lots of cycles interacting with each other. And a level 1 network is also not necessarily normal because a level 1 network can have a shortcut. So here we have a few examples of networks, and I just want to go through these 3 classes and explain for each network which class it belongs to. So the first one is not tree chart because it does have a stack. So remember, a stack is an edge incident with 2 reticulations, which clearly applies to this edge here. And because it's not tree chart, we immediately know it's not normal and it's not level 1 either, because both classes are subclasses of tree chart. The second network is tree chart, so it does not have a stack and it does not have a W. And now the question is, well, is it also normal? And yes, it is normal because you can look at each reticulation and you look at the 2 parents of the reticulation. And if they are incomparable, then you know that there is no shortcut. And this is the case for this network. So it is tree chart, it is also normal, but it's not level 1 because these small 2 cycles here, this one and that one, they interact, they share a vertex. The third network is not tree chart because it has a W. So this tree vertex here has 2 children, which are both reticulations. So consequently, it's not normal and it's not level 1. And the last one, yes, it is tree chart. But now this guy is not normal because it has a shortcut. So if we look at the reticulation above D and we look at the 2 parents, then we see that one is an ancestor of the other. So there is a shortcut. However, this network is level 1 because there's only 1 cycle. And what I now want to shift to is to encoding results for phylogenetic networks. So basically, I'll start with a display set question. So the question is, we're given a network and we're given the display set of that network. So remember, the display set are all the trees displayed by the network. And we want to know if the network is the only network that has this particular display set, in which case we say the network is encoded by the display set. So here we have 3 tree chart networks, and they have the same display set. So all 3 display the 2 triplets ABC and BCA. So we say that these or that tree chart networks in general are not encoded by their display set. And you may say, yeah, but this is like a really small example, right? So it just has like 2 triplets. So maybe this is only a problem because the example is so small. And this is, however, not the case, because you can attach a caterpillar type structure above the root of each of the 3 networks. So just a caterpillar tree-like structure with whatever number of leaves you like. And what you see is that each of the 3 tree chart networks still displays only 2 trees, and the 2 trees are the same for each of the 3 networks. So tree chart networks are not encoded by their display sets. And we could ask, but what about normal, right? Because this is tree chart, normal sits inside tree chart. So maybe there's some hope for tree chart networks. And this is what Stephen Wilson has looked at a few years ago. So Stephen Wilson has established the following result. That is, if you're given a normal network and you look at the display set of the normal network, T of n, then n is the unique normal network whose display set is T of n. Okay, so normal networks are encoded by their display sets. In fact, Wilson has established this result for a slightly larger class of networks, which is called regular networks. But for today's talk, let's go with the normal result. So normal networks are encoded by their display sets. And just as an aside, so if you're interested in computational complexity and questions around computational complexity, then what we've looked at a few years ago is if we're just given 2 networks and we want to find out if they have the same display set, can we actually do this? Is this something that's computationally tractable? And it turns out in general, it's computationally hard. So it's actually pi to p complete, which means it sits on the 2nd level of the polynomial time hierarchy. And so this is really bad news. But what we can also do is we can solve it in polynomial time if one network is normal and one is tree chart. So for normal, it's trivial, because for normal, we have the encoding result by Stephen Wilson. And just having like one normal and one tree chart network, we can still do it. It's a lengthy case analysis, but it's doable. However, we don't know what the computational complexity is for 2 tree chart networks. So this is still open. And now that we have the encoding result for normal network in terms of display sets, we could also ask, are normal networks or other network classes also encoded by their sets of triplets or other smaller subtrees, right? Because ideally we would like to look at really small subtrees instead of phylogenetic trees on the entire leaf set of the network. So the question now is, are normal networks also encoded by their triplets? And there has been some work on this by Philippe Gambit and Katharina Huber. They looked at level 1 networks. So they took a level 1 network and they were asking, is this level 1 network encoded by its display set or by its set of triplets? And it turns out level 1 networks are also encoded by their display sets, but they are also encoded by their sets of triplets. So the only proviso that they needed was that they required each underlying cycle in the network to have length at least 5. So there is a minimum length of 5, because otherwise we look at these two guys over here again, which you have seen before. So these have both one underlying cycle of length 4, and they display the same two trees and also the same two triplets. So the encoding result does not extend to level 1 networks whose underlying cycles have a length of less than 5. And that was the starting point for a question that Charles Semple and I asked a few years ago. We wanted to know, can we extend that result to normal networks? So are normal networks encoded by their sets of triplets? And the answer to that, first of all, is no. So if we look at these two networks, they're both normal. And the only way in which they differ is by the attachment point of this arc. So this attaches to the cycle in the first network and to the pendant edge directed into C in the second network, but they have exactly the same set of triplets. So I haven't written them all out. You need to believe me on that. They have the same set of triplets. But what we noted then is that the network on the left has a quad BCDE. So we pick up B, C, then D, and then we pick up E. So this is a quad displayed by the network on the left, and it's not a quad displayed by the network on the right. So we were wondering if we, instead of just considering the triplets, if we also consider the quads, can we actually get some traction on the problem in this way? And I'll start with the theorem, so I'll give you the results straight away. So it turns out that normal networks are encoded by their sets of triplets and quads. So if you're given all triplets and all quads, then you know that the network is the unique network whose sets of triplets and quads is R of n and Q of n. And additionally, like in Aho's case, we can reconstruct the network in polynomial time, given these two sets. And the next question then is, okay, we can do it for normal networks. So what happens if we go to a larger class? So let's look at tree chart networks. Are they also encoded by their triplets and quads? And the answer to this question is unfortunately no. So again, our three favorite networks that we have seen before, they have the same set of triplets, just two triplets, no quad. So the answer is no. And again, you probably ask me, but this is so small, right? What happens, I mean, if we actually have networks that contain at least one quad? But unfortunately, we can do the same trick. We add like a caterpillar type structure above the root of all three networks, and they then still display the same set of triplets and quads. So normal is unfortunately as good as we can go. Triplets and quads do not encode tree chart networks. And throughout the rest of the talk, I want to spend a little bit time now to talk about some of the ingredients that we used for the proof. So to establish this result, showing that normal networks are encoded by their triplets and quads, we used induction on the number of leaves in the network. So on the number of leaves in the set X. X is the leaf set of N. And there are basically three main ingredients for the proof. So if you think about trees for a minute, so whenever we do induction on the number of leaves in the tree, often what we look at is a cherry in the tree. We know that each tree has a cherry, so we can often delete a leaf in a cherry, and then this gets the induction going. For normal networks, yes, there could be a cherry, but we can easily think of an example where the network does not have a cherry. So just looking at cherries doesn't work. And that's why we have to find something that's called a reticulated cherry. So again, it's a subgraph that is close to the bottom of the network and that we can do some operations on. I'll talk a little bit more about this soon. So we need basically cherries and reticulated cherries to get the induction going. We also need to be able to recognize cherries. And it turns out that we can recognize cherries just from the set of triplets. So to recognize cherries, we do not need the quartz, but we do need the quartz to recognize these reticulated cherries. So these are basically the three main ingredients. And I'm going to talk about each of the three for a little bit. So cherries and reticulated cherries. So in the cherry case, we know there are two leaves, A and B, and they share a parent, which I denote by P of A equals P of B. So P of A is just the parent of A, and that node is the same as the parent of B. And whenever we see a cherry, we apply a cherry reduction to get the induction going. And to that end, we just delete the leaf B and we suppress the resulting vertex of in degree 1 and out degree 1. And now we have a smaller network, which has one leaf less. And the question is, how do we get the set of triplets and quartz for that smaller network? And this turns out to be easy. So we look at R of n and Q of n. And essentially what we do is we delete every triple and every quad that contains B. So no other operation required. So we can get the set of triplets and quads for the smaller network very easily. Now that's the cherry case. What about the reticulated cherry? So reticulated cherry AB with reticulation leaf B is of that form, namely that the parent of B is a reticulation. And we need to have an edge between the parent of A and the parent of B. So this is exactly this edge over here. So we have A and the parent of A, and the parent of A is connected to the parent of B. And then we have one more leaf B. So this, I guess this little subgraph on three leaves indicates that we have a reticulated cherry AB with reticulation leaf B. And because we are in the normal class of phylogenetic networks, so we consider normal networks, we can also look at the second parent of PB. So GB, you can think of this, if you like, as the grandparent of B. And we know the edge GB to PB is not a shortcut because the network is normal. So there is at least one leaf in this gray box here, which I've indicated in L, such that every path from the root to that leaf L will pass through GB. Okay, so in this case, whenever we have a reticulated cherry, AB, then we do, again, a reduction, and the reduction deletes B. So we delete B and P of B, and then we also delete the edge PA to PB to obtain this network whose leaf set is X minus B. And as in the previous case, we can obtain the set of triplets and quads quite easily from the set of triplets and quads of N by just deleting every triple and quad that contains B. So this is the first ingredient. And why is this actually important? So it turns out that every normal network with at least two leaves has either a cherry, so just an ordinary cherry as in a tree, and if it does not have such a cherry, it has a reticulated cherry AB. And once you have done this cherry or reticulated cherry reduction, deleting B, then the resulting network can be shown to be again normal. And because it's normal, then again, it has again a cherry or reticulated cherry. And this is how we get the induction going. So here is an example. We start with this network and it has a cherry DE, but it also has a reticulated cherry AB. And in this case here, I decided I'll take the reticulated cherry first. So I'll delete B. And if we delete B, then we are left with this network. And now the second operation is the deletion of D. D is an element of the cherry DE. So we delete D, and now we are left with this network. It has a reticulated cherry, AC or CE, if you like. So there's some choice here again. And for the purpose of this example, I have basically said, okay, let's look at the reticulated cherry AC and delete C. So after three reductions, we are left with a single cherry. So the second ingredient for the proof that we need is we need a way to recognize cherries. So remember, you're only given the set of triplets and the set of quarts. The network is hidden, right? So in some sense, you can think of, you start with a network, you look at the network, you extract all the triplets and quarts, and then the network is gone. You can't see it anymore. Now you're only given the set of triplets and quarts, and you want to reconstruct the network now. So to recognize cherries, it turns out we only need the triplets, so the quarts are not necessary. And we need to find some nicely balanced condition that is sufficient and necessary. So AB is a cherry in N. So I've pictured this over here. So suppose AB is a cherry in N. And this turns out to be the case if and only if the following condition is true. So let's say you have a triple X, Y, and Z in R of N. So X, Y, and Z is a triple in your set of triplets. And we know that AB is a subset of X, Y, Z. So 2 of the 3 leaves X, Y, Z coincide with A and B. Now, because A and B is a cherry, this can only be the case if X, Y equals AB. Okay, so Z can neither be A nor B. So if we have a set of triplets and there is a particular triple X, Y, Z, and we also know that AB is a subset of X, Y, Z, then it must be of the form that X, Y equals AB. And this condition is sufficient and necessary to recognize cherries. And that's the only condition we need to recognize cherries. As you can imagine, however, it gets more complicated in the reticulated cherry case. So I should say we do not just recognize reticulated cherries, but we also want to recognize the visibility set of that reticulated cherry. So the visibility set is the set of all leaves such that each path from the root to that leaf X passes through GB. So GB is the grandparent. So we want to find all the leaves below GB for which every path from the root to that leaf C, say, passes through GB. So for example, this immediately means that B is not in the visibility set because you can go from the root to B and use this edge. And in this case, we do not pass through G of B. So B is not in the visibility set of GB. And similarly, A is also not in the visibility set of GB. We can guarantee that the visibility set is never empty. So there is always at least one element in the visibility set, and that in some sense falls out of the normal definition of a network. And the reason why we need to be able to also recognize the visibility set is because at some point in our proof in the induction, once we have deleted B, we also need to have a way to reattach B back into the smaller network. And we need to find a way to pinpoint exactly which edge we need to attach B back into. So if we look at this example here, so imagine B is deleted. Now, at some point later, you want to reattach B back into the smaller network that you're given by the induction assumption. I will come to that later. You need to somehow pinpoint down this edge and the 2 endpoints of this edge. And these paths here, indicated in yellow, they can be quite large, and they can have lots of stuff hanging down from them. So it's important that we find a way to pinpoint down exactly this vertex. And that's why we need the visibility set. So to recognize a reticulated cherry with its visibility set, again, we need some sufficient and necessary conditions. And let's say AB is a reticulated cherry N. So this is exactly the situation that we see here. AB is a reticulated cherry with visibility set V of B. And this turns out to be the case if and only if a bunch of conditions are satisfied. And I don't go through all the conditions, but I want to give you a bit of like a taste of what types of conditions we have used. So the first condition is that for all elements X that are not equal to A and B. So it could be an element in the gray box over here, or it could be an element in the purple box. For all those elements, we know that A, B versus X must be a triple in R of n, because that is, we can always pick up A and B by using this edge, and then everything else is basically the third element in any triple. So for every element X, we always want to see the triple ABX in R of n. That's the first condition. Then suppose that the visibility set, it contains at least two elements. So let's call these two elements C and C prime. They're both elements in B. Then what we do not want to see in this case is the triple BCC prime. So BCC prime is not in R of n. Why is this? So C and C prime are both contained in the purple box. And because they're both in the visibility set, they meet first before they meet B. So we always put them together somewhere along this path, and then later on we pick up B. So we can't have a triple BCC prime in R of n. Now, for now, I've only given you two conditions that use the set of triples, but what about the set of quads? So the quads are needed in this case here. And I want to give you a couple of quads that we do not want to see in Q of n if A, B is a reticulated cherry. So suppose that C again is an element in the visibility set. And we also have a set Y, which is not equal to A and B, and it's also not in the visibility set. So this means C is in the visibility set, so it belongs to the purple box, if you like, whereas Y belongs to the gray box, somewhere above A and B. And in this case, we can exclude the following two quads. So YBAC is not a quad in Q of n. So YBAC, so what does that mean? So Y is somewhere in the gray box. So Y meets B first. So if B goes through this edge and then meets A, then, well, this means that B also meets A first before it meets Y. So this quad cannot be in Q of n if we use this edge, and if we use that edge, it's sort of by symmetry, we can also argue that it's not in the set of quads. So, and then we came up with a few more conditions. I'm glossing over quite a few details here, but you can come up with a list of necessary and sufficient conditions to recognize reticulated cherries. Now we're putting it all together. So just a reminder of what we want to show. So we're given a set of triples and quads that come from a normal network N. And we want to show that N is the unique normal network on X whose set of triples and quads is R of n and Q of n. And we do this by induction on the size of the leaf set. So by induction on the cardinality of X. If the cardinality of X equals 1 or 2, then N is either a single vertex or a cherry. So this is the base case. It's not too exciting. What happens if we have at least 3 leaves in the leaf set? So suppose X, the cardinality of X is strictly greater than 2, and that the result holds for all normal networks whose leaf set size is at most cardinality of X minus 1. And we want to show that the network N, for which we have all the triplets and quads, that this is the unique network. So suppose that there's another normal network, and I've called this N1. Suppose there exists a network N1 whose set of triplets and quads is also R of n and Q of n. So basically, what we want to show is that N1 and N are isomorphic. And to get the induction going, we know that there's either a cherry or a reticulated cherry. So I'll talk you through the cherry case, because as you can guess by now, this is the easier case. So say N has a cherry AB. Now, because N1 has the same set of triplets and quads, by the recognizing conditions of how we recognize a cherry, we know that N1 also has this cherry. So both networks, N and N1, both have cherry AB. And now we can obtain smaller networks, n minus b and n1 minus b, by reducing the cherry AB. Okay, so we start with n and n1. They both have cherry AB. We do not know anything about what's further up in the network, but we do know they both have cherry AB, and we reduce that cherry. I guess that's not consistent with my other slides. In this case, I've deleted A. And okay, so this should be n minus A and n1 minus A. Sorry about this. Anyway, so once we have deleted one leaf of the cherry, we know that the two smaller networks have the same set of triplets and quads because of the way we reconstruct these smaller set of triplets and quads. Remember, we just delete all the triplets and quads that have this leaf that we deleted from the network. So by the induction, then we know that the two smaller networks are isomorphic. So these two guys are isomorphic. And now what we need to show is that the only way we can add the leaf A back to those two networks is by basically subdividing a unique edge in the network, and that's the edge directed into B, to obtain a network with cherry AB. And because the two smaller networks are isomorphic, we know that the resulting networks are also isomorphic. That's the cherry case. If the network does not have a cherry, then we know that it has a reticulated cherry AB, and that this reticulated cherry has also visibility set. And because we are able to recognize reticulated cherries easily, and also the visibility set, we can apply the sufficient and necessary conditions to argue that N1 also has reticulated cherry AB. And then we basically follow the same strategy as in the cherry case to complete the proof. But as you can imagine, it's a bit more tricky. So there's a bit more work here involved to argue that the unique network that you get is N, and that there is not a second network with the same set of triples and quads. So because the proof is by induction, it's quite nice because we get a polynomial time algorithm to reconstruct N from R of N and Q of N almost for free. So just by inspecting the induction, we get this algorithm, and it's a polynomial time algorithm. Oops, so one more slide. So I guess what's the next step? So the next step, or one of the next steps, is to think about an analogous algorithm to build. So this would be an algorithm that takes an arbitrary set of triplets and quads as input and decides whether or not there exists a normal network that displays the input. So in this case, we do not know that the set of triplets and quads comes from a network or not. So it would just be given some sets, and we need to decide whether there exists such a network, and then in this case reconstruct the network, or basically exit and report back that no such network exists. And for completeness, I should say that there are such algorithms already for level 1 networks, and I think they have polynomial running time as long as the input is a set of dense triplets. So that means for every 3 leaves, there is at least 1 triple in the input. And if the set of triplets is dense, then in polynomial time, you can reconstruct a level 1 network that is consistent with as many triplets of your input as possible, or exit and report that no such network exists. And that's the end of my talk. If you're interested in the finer details, have a look at that paper or drop me an email. And yeah, thank you very much. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Simone. Very interesting. So go ahead and type in questions in chat if you have some. I guess I'm sort of interested. I'm going to ask 2 questions. One is sort of like pushing things in a more theoretical direction, and the other is sort of pushing things in a more practical direction. So I guess I'm sort of interested in, it really feels like this normality assumption is closely tied with like a visibility set. Mm-hmm. And it seems in a sense like just the right assumption that you need in order to make your proof work. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with that. So the fact that we don't have the shortcuts, it's quite important. So as soon as we go to tree chart networks and allow shortcuts, it's getting even more complicated. And we just don't know what to do in this case at the moment.
But I guess I just sort of wonder, like, I mean, you've seen the guts of all of this. I just wonder, is there some other sort of assumption that you could make that would be a little bit weaker, maybe not all the way to tree child, but that would enable the algorithm maybe with a little bit of extra complication?
Yeah, we have looked at some classes. So we have invented some new classes that basically sit between normal and tree child. Yeah, we don't know how to do it at the moment. So whatever we tried, it didn't go through. But yeah, I mean, there is definitely some hope if someone comes up with a new interesting class that it can be done. But it's not straightforward, unfortunately.
So, I mean, I guess the more practical question is, in a sense, like, I guess the application of this would be that you could reconstruct sort of lots, like you might have a set of mosaic genomes, and then for each one you could construct a bunch of little trees for subsets of the data and then put them all together. But that sort of begs the question of, like, maybe we don't have all of the trees that you would expect in the network. So even if they're sort of compatible, even if we sort of start, I mean, you address this a little bit with the build algorithm, but even if we sort of start with the hypothesis that there is a network that has them all sitting in them, is there some sense of, like, okay, how many trees do we need to resolve these networks, or something more of a, like, I don't know, maybe probabilistic flavor, like what is the probability that we're going to get all of the edges or something like that?
Yeah, so I haven't looked at these questions, to be honest. But like what I said in the very end, I think there are some results for level 1 networks.
Mm-hmm.
So for level 1 networks, you can basically come up with a level 1 network that explains as many of the input triplets as possible, as long as you have at least one triple in the input for every 3 leaves of your leaf set. So this is what we call like a dense set of triplets. So you pick your 3 favorite leaves, and you know that there's at least one of these 3 possible triplets in your input.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
So if you have an input of that form, then you can reconstruct a level 1 network, and you can do that quickly. We don't know what to do for normal networks. So we started looking at normal networks a little bit, and then some other questions on normal networks popped up. So we're looking at some other questions now first, and then probably go back to that question.
I guess here's a sort of another less practical question. Like, is there some larger framework in which all of this sits? Like, in a sense, it was nice that you have this pretty explicit construction, because then you, like you say, you get the polynomial time algorithm for free. But I guess I just sort of wonder, like, I don't know, in some sort of sense of like some spanning set of some algebra, I don't know. It just feels like, I wonder if there's something sort of like some larger mathematical construction that you could use to prove these types of results. Probably not. But.
Maybe. Yeah, it would be nice if there was something like that. Definitely. If we can connect it to some other math, that's always quite interesting, I think.
It's also sort of very interesting that, like, okay, triples aren't enough, but then quads are enough, and you don't need the tree, like the balanced trees.
Yeah,
right?
so
you just need the quads as you define them.
Yeah, so this is something we thought it's quite interesting. I mean, even the fact that trees on 4 leaves are sufficient, It's quite interesting. But then, yeah, as you said, on top, we also only need this one tree shape, the caterpillar on 4 leaves. We don't need the balanced tree shape on 4 leaves. But unfortunately, then going up, you may think like, yeah, if we consider tree chart networks, then maybe if we consider all trees on 5 leaves, maybe that is enough or something like that. But for tree chart, unfortunately, even if you're given all the trees and all subtrees, you can't do it. It's just not encoded anymore. So there's something very special about these normal networks.
Right. I mean, it does seem like the no shortcut is close to like feeling like some sort of identifiability thing. Like there's sort of like there's no way that you would be able to like understand things if you do have these sort of ability to shortcut.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely right. So whenever we try to prove something, we would always go to the non-shortcut case first and get an idea of what's happening and if we can do it or not. And then if we can do that case, we look at the shortcut. But yeah, unfortunately, as soon as you have shortcuts, it's getting so much more complicated.
Good. Okay, well, I haven't seen any questions. That was a very clear talk. I usually have to interrupt the speaker to clarify things, but that was really fantastically clear. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cool. All right, so I guess let's see. Our next talk is that from, yeah, Vince Moulton, and that's going to be on April 27th. Cool. All right, thanks again.
Thank you.